Dr. Seuss cheated on his wife while she had cancer. After finding out about the affair, she killed herself and Dr. Seuss married his mistress. This former jailer from Georgia was arrested on rape charges. Police say the scratch marks in his mugshot are from the victim fighting back. This is a photo of a 9-year-old boy from Amsterdam during the winter hunger Dutch famine that ended in 1945. Many children carried spoons with them wherever they went just in case they'd be offered a meal. This is a medical journal showing the before and after of a mental patient who received a lobotomy. The caption reads, "Simple schizophrenia patients make nice household pets after operation." In 1980, when a group of loggers were cutting off the top of a chestnut oak tree, they noticed the mummified remains of a hunting dog. Experts believe that it chased its prey up the tree in the 1960s, only to get stuck and eventually die. He was posthumously named Stucky. After Wildlife Wonderland in Melbourne, Australia went abandoned in 2012, a dead great white shark was left to decompose in a tank for more than 5 years. This is a leaked screenshot from CNN's supposed doomsday tape. The footage is meant to be broadcasted by the last surviving employee in case all of humanity is about to die. It features a marching band playing the song "Nearer My God to Thee," the same song that onboard musicians played as the Titanic sank. In 1976, 7 armed men broke into Bob Marley's home and attempted to assassinate him. Bob was shot in the chest and the arm but survived. His wife Rita was shot in the head but also survived thanks to her thick dreadlocks slowing down the bullet. Marley's manager claimed that the CIA was behind the assassination attempt. In 1894, a priest in Germany saved a little boy from drowning. That little boy was Adolf Hitler. In many of his later portraits, Napoleon Bonaparte can be seen with his hand over his stomach. This is because he suffered from severe abdominal pain due to what we can identify today as stomach cancer. It is believed that he died from the cancer at the age of 51. Per Olin, better known by his stage name Dead, was the lead singer for the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem. At the age of 10, he was attacked by some bullies who left him so badly injured that he was declared clinically dead for a few minutes. After this incident, he began an unhealthy obsession for everything related to death. He collected dead birds, performed using corpse paint, and would even routinely cut himself while on stage. Dead was believed to have suffered from Cotard syndrome, a mental disorder characterized by the belief that you are truly dead and don't exist in reality. In 1991, he committed suicide by slitting his wrists and throat before shooting himself in the forehead with a shotgun. He left a suicide note that was very brief because he didn't believe that he was alive in the first place. Dennis Vashurin looks like a young teenage boy, but he's actually 32 years old. Due to a genetic malfunction, Dennis stopped aging sometime in his teens, but otherwise he's healthy. In ancient Rome, men found guilty of rape sometimes had their testicles crushed between 2 stones. In Devon, England, there's a shadow of a sign that closely resembles a person being hanged. Coincidentally, it can be seen near a spot called Dead Man's Cross, where criminals were hanged from a gallows in the 13th century. Richard Klinkhammer's wife mysteriously disappeared in 1991. The next year, he wrote a book on 7 ways to kill your spouse. A few years later, the new owners of his former home found his wife's skeletal remains. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison but was released 5 years early for good behavior. In 2009, spelunker John Jones was caving with some friends and family in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. About an hour into the expedition, John decided to find the route known as the Birth Canal, a narrow passage that spelunkers must crawl through carefully if they dare. After finding what he thought was the birth canal, he crawled in head first and started inching his way forward. But John would soon realize that this wasn't the birth canal, since it was way tighter than anything safe to crawl through. By this point, John didn't even have enough room to wiggle out the way he came, so his only option was to push forward. Over the next 27 hours, hundreds of rescuers failed to pull John out of the crevice. At some point, John died from cardiac arrest and his body was never retrieved. The Nutty Putty Cave has since been sealed off. There's a long-running fan theory that Kevin McAllister from Home Alone grows up to become Jigsaw from Saw. The connection starts with Kevin's childhood obsession with elaborate traps, rigging blowtorches, swinging paint cans, and setting up nail-piercing steps as the early versions of Jigsaw's sadistic games. Both characters share the same piercing blue eyes and light hair, a calm, calculating demeanor, and a tendency to taunt or psychologically torment their victims. Kevin also grows up in the Midwest, while John Kramer's backstory places him in a similar American setting. Fans point out that Kevin shows no real remorse for the pain he inflicts. He laughs as the wet bandits are electrocuted, burned, and brutalized, and that his creativity seems to flourish under isolation and neglect, a psychological connection to Jigsaw's warped sense of justice. Even the iconic tricycle in Saw has been compared to Kevin's love for riding around on bikes in the Home Alone films. In this theory, the wet bandits weren't just burglars, they were Kevin's first test subjects. On December 10, 2021, a violent tornado tore through the Rackley family's home near Caruthersville, Missouri. 9-year-old Ernestine and her sisters huddled with their mother in a windowless bathroom, where their mom snapped a final photo to reassure relatives that they were all in their safe space. But moments later, the twister ripped the house apart and hurled the family into a nearby field. While Ernestine's parents and sisters survived with injuries, the 9-year-old girl was tragically killed. In 1999, Texas man Herschel Rawls went into surgery to have his cancerous bladder removed, but he woke up to an absolute nightmare. Without warning, doctors had also amputated his beef bayonet, claiming that the cancer had spread and that the drastic step was necessary to save his life. But weeks later, pathology tests revealed that the penile tissue they had cut away wasn't cancerous at all. After years of anguish, Rawls sued and in 2003 reached a quiet out-of-court settlement, but was left with the grim reminder of how a single surgical decision can leave a patient permanently mutilated. In honor of Jane Goodall, these are the most bizarre and disturbing behaviors ever observed in chimpanzees. In 2008, a chimpanzee from Zambia named Julie was spotted with a strange new habit. She would stick a piece of grass in her ear and just leave it there. It served no purpose for food, grooming, or communication. But soon enough, other chimps in her group began copying her, as researchers eventually realized this was the first fashion statement ever observed in the wild. Lucy the chimpanzee was raised from birth to believe she was a human. She learned to sign over 250 words in American Sign Language, but also picked up some rather disturbing human habits. Lucy developed a taste for gin, spent time flipping through Playgirl magazines, and even used a vacuum cleaner to masturbate. When she became too difficult to control, researchers released her into the wild. But years later, her body was found mutilated, most likely killed by poachers. Azalea the chimpanzee lives in a North Korean zoo and has been known to smoke a pack of cigarettes per day. She's learned to use a lighter and can even light one cigarette with the burning end of another. In Uganda, scientists observed young chimpanzees caring for sticks and rocks as if they were children caring for dolls. They cradled them, carried them into nests, and treated them as if they were babies. The eerie implication is that chimps, like humans, may be capable of imagination and symbolic play. In 1997, a chimpanzee named Santino stunned researchers with his violent planning at a Swedish zoo. Each morning, while calm, he gathered stones and stacked them in hidden piles around his enclosure. Later in the day, when he became agitated, he used those piles to launch surprise attacks on zoo visitors. It was the first clear evidence that an animal had deliberately prepared for future violence. This was the horrifying moment when Jane Goodall uncovered the savage truth behind chimpanzees. In the 1970s, Goodall and her team witnessed a shocking 4-year conflict known today as the Gombe Chimpanzee War. A single chimp community in Tanzania split into 2 rival factions, and the carnage that followed shattered the long-held belief that chimps were peaceful creatures. The war started when 6 males ambushed a lone rival and tore him to shreds, and over the next few years, the stronger group carried out coordinated raids in which every male of the weaker side was hunted down and killed in brutal fashion. Females were beaten, kidnapped, and often murdered until the losing community was completely wiped out. For Goodall, who had once described her chimps as gentle and idyllic, the violence was devastating. She admitted to having constant nightmares about the carnage and about watching individuals she had known since infancy transform into cold-blooded killers. The scientific world was equally shaken. The war revealed that chimpanzees, like humans, are capable not only of affection and cooperation, but also of organized warfare, murder, and ruthless extermination. Baby Molly Gibson was born in October of 2020, but she was technically 27 years old at her birth, just 2 years younger than her mom. Her embryo was donated in 1992 and stored in a liquid nitrogen tank until she was adopted in 2020 for in vitro fertilization. In 1994, a Russian pilot allowed his 16-year-old son to sit at the controls of the plane. But his son accidentally disabled the autopilot, crashing the plane and killing all 75 passengers on board. From the time of its discovery to its demotion, Pluto didn't even make one full revolution around the sun. If you hit someone with your car in China, you must pay for their medical care for the rest of their life. But if you kill someone with your car, you only have to pay a one-time fee. For this reason, it's common for people to go back and kill someone they accidentally hit. In a 1974 art performance, Marina Abramovich told visitors she wouldn't move for 6 hours no matter what they did to her. She placed 72 items on a table and invited people to use them on her however they pleased with no punishment. There were objects for pleasure including a rose, perfume and wine, as well as objects for pain including scissors, a whip, and a loaded gun. Visitors were gentle to begin with but gradually got more aggressive as they became comfortable. Within 3 hours, all of her clothes had been completely cut off and some people even started slicing her skin. She was sexually assaulted various times and had rose thorns stuck in her abdomen. One person even held the gun to her head until someone else took it away. Afterwards, Abramovich said, "If you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you." Born in 1661, Charles II of Spain was the result of 200 years of inbreeding that intended to strengthen the family line. He was breastfed until the age of 4 and never fully learned how to walk. As an adult, he was completely illiterate and could barely chew or speak due to his deformed jaw. He was so ugly and disfigured that his own wife was terrified of him. In 2010, a Canadian man rescued a newborn baby from a dumpster only to find out that he was the father. In isolation wards where patients die alone, nurses fill gloves with warm water to simulate the touch of their loved ones. They call it the hand of God. In 1990, British Airways Flight 5390 experienced a window failure in the cockpit, causing the captain to be sucked out. But the crew held on to him for 20 minutes and he miraculously survived despite some frostbite and a few fractures. Shortly after going missing for 6 days, Edgar Allan Poe died a mysterious death. When he was found, he was wearing another man's cheap clothing and couldn't explain where he'd been. Acting delirious and distressed, he was brought to the hospital where he died of unknown causes at the age of 40. Bella and Edward's relationship throughout the Twilight series meets all 15 official criteria for an abusive relationship. Up until the 1800s, Turkish women who were accused of cheating on their husbands were tied up in a sack filled with cats, then thrown in the ocean. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up damaging only one office room and he was the only person that died. To unlock the secrets of a genius, the man who performed Einstein's autopsy stole his brain and kept it in a jar for 20 years. He found that the part of Einstein's brain that processes math and language was 15% bigger than the average human's. Throughout history, a total of 9 nuclear submarines have been lost around the world. Most of them are still on the ocean floor with nuclear weapons that are still intact. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. When the Soviet Union was pushing toward Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. During World War II, the Polish army officially enlisted a brown bear named Wojtek. He enjoyed drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, and wrestling, as he served as a morale booster for soldiers. Bill Millen was a personal piper who played his bagpipes on D-Day while his fellow comrades were getting killed all around him. The only reason German snipers didn't shoot him was because they thought he had gone mad. During the Vietnam War, John Donahue took a plane from New York City and snuck into the war zone to deliver beer to his buddies. It is known as the greatest beer run ever, and there have been multiple documentaries made about it. In 2013, a group of burglars stole a bunch of computers from an office building. But they soon returned the items with this note because they realized they had stolen from a non-profit group that helps victims of sexual abuse. These are shoes made to look like cow hooves that were worn by moonshiners to hide their tracks during Prohibition. Serial killer Robert Hansen was responsible for the murders of at least 17 women throughout the 70s and 80s. He would first abduct his victims and fly them to his isolated cabin in the Alaskan mountains, which was only accessible by boat or plane. He would then release them and hunt them down like wild animals, using a knife or hunting rifle. During World War II, Yang Kyung-jong was a Korean soldier who was captured by the Japanese and forced to fight the Soviets. He was then captured by the Soviets and forced to fight the Germans. Eventually, he was captured by the Germans and forced to defend Normandy, where he was finally captured by Americans and sent to a prison camp. He is the only known soldier to have ever fought on 3 sides of a war. During World War II, many zoo animals in Germany were taken care of by civilians in their own homes. In 1961, the U.S. Army accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb on North Carolina. The bomb was 260 times more powerful than the nuke dropped on Hiroshima. Only a single switch prevented it from detonating. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about 1 week after blastoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from overheating and panic just a few hours after the mission started. The entire planet Saturn is less dense than water. This means that if there was a pool big enough for it, the planet would float. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev got stuck in space during the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Since the country that sent him into space had no longer existed, his return home was delayed. He stayed in space for 311 days, twice as long as the mission originally called for. This is why your parents always check your Halloween candy before you eat it. On Halloween in 1974, Ronald O'Brien laced his 8-year-old son's pixie sticks with cyanide so that he could claim the boy's life insurance. He also gave the candy to 4 other kids to set up the story that a local madman had poisoned them. Once police received word of the first boy's death, 3 of the 4 remaining candies were recovered quickly, but 1 was still out there. When the parents of this final child were informed by police, they became hysterical when they couldn't find the pixie stick in their son's bag. So they rushed upstairs to find the boy in his bed with the poisoned candy in his hand. He had thankfully been unable to open the wrapper because of the staple that was used to reseal it. So Timothy O'Brien ended up being the only confirmed case of a kid dying from poisoned Halloween candy, and it was done by his own father. 7. After a failed circumcision led to a sex reassignment surgery, David Reimer was raised as a girl. Once he found out that he was in fact not a girl, Reimer started living as a male at the age of 15. But after years of suffering from severe depression and confusion, Reimer took his own life at the age of 38. Many shelters won't allow black cats to be adopted around Halloween time, out of fear that they might be tortured or sacrificed. In many cities across the US, people on the sex offender registry have to keep their outdoor lights off during Halloween. This is a 1948 photo of a Chicago mother hiding her face in shame after putting her children up for sale. 2 of them were sold to an abusive family for $2 apiece so that their mother could afford rent. Their new father would often tie them up in a barn and force them to work long hours, often referring to them as slaves. If you were to swim near a pod of narwhals and happen to hear one whistle, it might be the last thing that you ever hear. The sounds that narwhals make are so loud that they're said to be deafening to humans. In 2006, a 38-year-old woman who had been missing for 3 years was found dead in her London home with the TV still running. Cats have contributed to the extinction of at least 63 global vertebrate species. They're often considered to be one of the most environmentally damaging invasive predators on the planet. In 2018, a woman who received a lung transplant went into anaphylactic shock after eating peanuts even though she'd never been allergic before. She later discovered that the boy who gave her the lungs had a peanut allergy and actually died from anaphylactic shock himself. In 1912, President Teddy Roosevelt was shot in the chest just before giving a speech. Upon noticing the bullet missed his lungs, he carried on despite the blood seeping from his shirt. He delivered the full 90-minute speech before accepting medical attention. The first bomb dropped by the Allies during World War II killed the only elephant in the Berlin Zoo. Alfonso Flores from Texas received a major cosmetic surgery to increase his height from 5'11" to 6'1". He claimed it allowed him to finally achieve his dream of becoming tall. In 2009, Larry Maria Moncada from Iowa disappeared after working his shift at the supermarket. He was missing for more than a decade until his body was found when the supermarket was renovated. The man had fallen into a small gap between the wall and cooler, likely dying from dehydration after a few days of being stuck. Brooke Greenberg was an American woman with an unknown condition called Syndrome X that prevented her from aging. She was 20 years old at the time of her death, but never developed physically or mentally past the age of 1. To make a sword from the blood of your enemies, you would have to kill over 300 people to get enough iron. The US military sends many of its doctors to Chicago to give them practice on gunshot wounds. During World War II, the Soviets tried to train dogs to run under enemy tanks with bombs strapped to their backs. However, this plan fortunately ended up backfiring for the Soviets. Because the dogs had been trained using Soviet tanks, many dogs ended up running to them during actual combat, blowing up friendly tanks instead. These extraterrestrial rocks were discovered in the sand of the Sahara. Libyan desert glass is one of the rarest minerals on Earth, and it's of unknown origin. Since only a celestial impact or a nuclear explosion would have resulted in such a geological anomaly. Pieces of the extremely rare mineral were even found in the tomb of King Tut. This is what Saturn would look like if it were as close to Earth as the Moon. It's been estimated that there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. But there are more atoms in one grain of sand than there are stars in the universe. When Southern California was hit with a massive power outage in 1994, a bunch of LA residents began to call 911 about strange clouds hovering overhead. In reality, they were just seeing the Milky Way for the first time. Infamous streaker Mark Roberts was sponsored by GoldenPalace.com to streak during Super Bowl 38. He was paid $1 million, given front row tickets, and was provided with one of the best defense attorneys in the US. He was able to reduce his charges down to a misdemeanor and a $1,000 fine. Brian Banks spent 6 years in prison before his alleged rape victim admitted that it never happened. This was the moment when he was exonerated. In 2006, 51-year-old Susan Walters was attacked by a hitman that her husband had hired to kill her. After finding out who sent him, she ended up killing him with her bare hands. Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Drexel Biddle was a master in hand-to-hand combat. He used to order his troops to surround him with bayonets before single-handedly disarming each of them without any of his own weapons. This photo of one such demonstration was taken in 1943. Tsar Bomba was the largest bomb ever set off by far. It produced a mushroom cloud 168 times taller than the Empire State Building. Its power output was 1.4% of the sun's, and it sent shockwaves that traveled around the Earth 3 times. After a battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. Horseshoe crabs have been around for 450 million years and have blue blood. Instead of hemoglobin, their blood contains hemocyanin, which gets its blue color from oxygenated copper. Their blood is so valuable to the medical industry that a gallon costs around $60,000. The sting of the tarantula hawk wasp is so unbearable that victims are often advised to lie down and start screaming to avoid further injury. In 2018, Russian scientists collected and analyzed 300 prehistoric worms from Arctic permafrost. After being thawed, 2 of the worms began to move and eat. Both of the worms are estimated to be well over 30,000 years old. Pablo Escobar's nephew still lives in one of the drug lord's apartments in Medellin. He recently found $18 million in cash hidden away in a plastic bag behind a wall. He told Colombian media that a vision told him where to look for the cash. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up as the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and used him as a sex slave for several days. Peruvian Mayor Jaime Rolando Urbina Torres broke the nationwide lockdown to go drinking with friends. When authorities attempted to apprehend him, the drunken mayor jumped into an empty coffin that was lying near him and pretended to be dead.